So what concerns me is that you have, again, this WEF partnership against cybercrime. They link not just Bitcoin in terms of its existence as a driver of cybercrime, but any sort of Bitcoin having any sort of value of significance. Right. So essentially what they say there is that in order to stop cybercrime, you should not just stop people from being able to use Bitcoin as a currency. You should essentially target Bitcoin and drive its value down to zero. Because as long as it has value, it's still a driver of cybercrime.
Bitcoin is often sold as freedom money, but Whitney Webb argues the real fight is much darker than price charts or adoption headline. In this conversation, she warns that Bitcoin may be increasingly framed as a public threat, tied to cybercrime, surveillance, and even future financial control systems. If she's right, then the question is no longer whether Bitcoin survives as an asset. The question is whether ordinary people will still be allowed to use it as a tool of freedom. Whitney starts with something bigger than regulation. She is describing narrative warfare. Once institutions begin connecting Bitcoin itself to cybercrime, they are not merely criticizing bad actors. They are redefining the asset as socially dangerous. That creates political cover for harsher action later. If people can be convinced that Bitcoin's value helps crime, then anything done against Bitcoin starts sounding reasonable, even necessary. So this is not just a financial debate. It is a battle over framing. Whoever controls that framing can shake public opinion, justify state power, and slowly turn a freedom technology into something treated like a threat.
So that's pretty crazy. And if you consider, the insane efforts that are technically really illegal of the U.S. government right now to stop, for example, banks from engaging in crypto business, like you had with Signature Bank, for example. I mean, that's totally insane what happened there.
This is where Whitney moves from theory to policy consequence. If Bitcoin is treated as inherently criminal as long as it has value, then the logical endpoint is not oversight, it is destruction. Her point is that the attack would not need to begin with an outright ban. It could happen through pressure points, banks, payment rails, exchanges, custody providers, and access to liquidity. That is why her Signature Bank example matters. She is warning that the modern financial system has choke points, and governments do not need to erase Bitcoin from the internet to damage it. They only need to squeeze the bridges ordinary people use.
And really egregious. If this type of activity continues, which is likely, what we could see could be truly unprecedented stuff, like efforts to completely illegalize the use of Bitcoin as a currency. Now, would that actually be able to work? Would people still be able to get around that? It depends on how they do it, and it depends on how successful this dragnet of surveillance and this effort to completely upend privacy, how it actually goes.
This is one of the most important warnings in the entire clip. Whitney is not saying the danger is simply market suppression. She is saying the real battlefield is privacy. If surveillance becomes total enough, then the state does not need to ban every wallet in a dramatic headline. It can make private use impractical, risky, or traceable enough that most people self-censor. That changes Bitcoin from an instrument of autonomy into a monitored financial lane. In other words, the fight is not only over whether Bitcoin exists, it is over whether people can use it without feeding a system designed to watch, profile, and control them.
Unfortunately for me, I do hold some Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, when you're facing, when it seems like a major economic crisis is waiting in the wings, Bitcoin, just like gold, you can't eat it, right? So there's certain things that I think people should do to prepare that involve, taking care of your more immediate needs, maybe having a food store, having plans like that about securing, your basic needs for you and your family in some type of crisis.
What makes Whitney different from a typical Bitcoin evangelist is that she adds realism. She is not mocking Bitcoin here. She is warning against fantasy. In a real crisis, people still need food, water, energy, medicine, and resilient local plans. That matters because many viewers hear freedom technology and imagine a single solution to a collapsing system. Whitney is saying freedom requires layers. Financial sovereignty helps, but it does not replace practical survival. In a serious disruption, the family with cold storage and no groceries is not actually secure. So her argument is broader. Prepare economically, digitally, and physically, because systemic shocks do not arrive one dimension at a time.
But at the same time, too, with Bitcoin, I think it's important to keep in mind, there is a lot of technology that certain people use to try and keep their Bitcoin or their cryptocurrency transactions in general for being surveilled. But me personally, knowing what I know about the national security state, I don't really have any illusions of privacy in that regard. So, I think people need to keep this stuff in mind and be realistic. But ultimately, I do really like the ethos of a lot of Bitcoiners, because they really are at the frontier of fighting a lot of these encroachments on basically what is the end of privacy.
This clip is important because Whitney is not anti-Bitcoin. She actually respects the spirit behind it. What she is doing is separating ethos from complacency. She sees many Bitcoiners as early resistors to digital control, especially on privacy and financial censorship. But she also suggests that good intentions are not enough. If people assume the protocol alone guarantees freedom, they may underestimate the political systems closing in around it. That is why this section works so well in your edit. It keeps the tone balanced. She is giving credit where it is due, while reminding the audience that technology still lives inside a world of institutions, coercion, and law.
Into CBDC tokens or something like that, or some other sort of paradigm like that. I think people need to be really aware of that and have some sort of, cold storage option for Bitcoin, or something like that, where if that is the way they try and get people onboarded to CBDC, whether they like it or not, which is, more likely than not, to be honest. People need to be prepared for that in the Bitcoin community and have, a really spend some serious time thinking about, if this stuff does come to pass, what are you going to do? And if you want to continue using Bitcoin, how are you going to, ensure that you will be able to use it, even if the regulatory and, law enforcement, gets involved trying to go after Bitcoiners in a very aggressive way. I think we don't want to sleepwalk into any of these sorts of situations. So, even though it sounds kind of dire, it's just important for people to be aware of what the stakes are and what these people are planning. Otherwise, you might be caught unprepared, right?
Whitney's final warning is practical. If crisis is used to push people into centralized digital money, then custody becomes everything. Her CBDC scenario is not presented as science fiction. It is framed as a plausible emergency response. Fear, disruption, then a state-backed solution. That is why she emphasizes cold storage. The deeper point is independence from permissioned infrastructure. If your access depends entirely on platforms, intermediaries, or systems that can be frozen, redirected, or reclassified, then your freedom is conditional. This makes a powerful closing section because it turns the conversation from abstract fear into a concrete question. How do you stay sovereign when pressure arrives?
For Americans. But I think there's a lot of other ways that this needs to be tackled as well. And one of it, there was a really good article that I read the other day, written in Off Guardian, which is a UK outlet, and it was essentially arguing that our slavery to convenience in the form of the smartphone is essentially what's being used to push us into this paradigm. And I was interested listening to this interesting interview the other day by a guy named E.B. Tucker, and he was sort of talking about this cyber attack paradigm that is talked about a lot in these WEF policy papers, and how what they his theory about what they could do is there's this cybercrime, this cyber attack, your phone starts working and the federal government tells everyone, oh, your money's not safe, so for your security we're transferring your holdings in this or that, regardless of what it's in.
Whitney Webb's message is not that Bitcoin automatically saves us, and not that it is already doomed. Her message is that freedom only survives if people understand the pressure being built around privacy, banking access, surveillance, and central bank digital control. Bitcoin may be part of the answer, but only if people prepare seriously and refuse to sleepwalk into systems designed to remove choice.